Happy Friday, friends. I hope you all are having a wonderful start to your weekend. I'm outside in one of my favorite places, the raised bed garden. I got the wind chimes chiming behind me. I just picked up the kiddos from school, and it's a really lovely afternoon here. So I have a pretty big weekend. I have been amending the beds in the tunnel, and this weekend I'm going to plant the tunnel with my fall starts. I'm also going to be planting the rest of those things out here in the raised bed garden, which I really need to do because my brassicas are getting demolished. I'm going to actually grab a start and show you guys. Alright, let me move the camera up. Alright, so right here you guys see all the lacing, all this right here. This is from this pesty little thing we call a caterpillar. I cannot stand these things because your plants can be beautiful. You can have the most beautiful starts, brassicas out in your garden, and within like a day you would be surprised how much damage they do. Actually, I can see them, so we're gonna try to zoom in and show you guys. Do you see the caterpillar right there? There's some right here on this leaf. Maybe you guys can see that. So caterpillars are usually the biggest pest for me with the fall garden, which is why I use that 9-gauge wire I was talking about in a previous video with insect nettings, because it is really the only way I can grow brassicas successfully here. And I don't know if this is a South thing. You know, like I don't know if colder climates deal with this as much. I really don't know. I just know for me, I'm growing in zone 7B. This is my biggest issue every year. And I guess I was just naive to think that they wouldn't attack my starts before I got them in the ground. But naive I was, because here they are. And so if you are dealing with this, you can, spray. There are organic sprays and things you can do. Diatomaceous earth you can sprinkle on there. So those are things you can do. I just did, handpick these off. That is my first way to try to combat against the pests, is just to hand pick them. And then secondly, I'm putting systems in place, which is actually kind of the whole point of this video. I'm going to show you guys in a minute, is efficient systems. This is something we're trying to move to, and I'll touch on a bit later in this video. But for me, just putting that insect netting up makes the season much more efficient for me, because I'm not out there hand picking all these off. I'm not out there every single week reapplying and spraying something, or sprinkling something on here. But it is disheartening. So I would encourage you guys, try to put some sort of system in place if you're noticing that you're having those issues. If you have put some sort of system in place, and maybe you're having pests that are in the soil that are coming up and getting underneath that insect netting, by all means, spray something. I don't think it's worth losing your crop, especially when there's a lot of really good organic options out there. I just wasn't expecting to see them on my starts. I came out here the other day and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I was so frustrated. So I'm going to go through behind me there. There's a whole bunch of brassicas. So I will be hand picking all of those off before they end up making their way into the garden and just start multiplying. That's also the thing too. Those stinking caterpillars can go from 1 to 100 pretty quickly. I did get my Greenstalk Planter the other day, and I wanted to show you guys that as well, because I think it's really pretty. It was like, finally I'm starting to add my own personal touches in the garden, and like, okay, where would I put this? Where would I put that? And so I finally got the Greenstalk Planter with some stuff. Oh my gosh, I feel like a total goober, but I've been trying to figure out tripods to where I'm not always, I have my small tripod, which is about this big. And so it's really hard to, get the right angles where I'm able to teach you guys, and then I have this small tripod. So I've had this tripod that I'm using now for a while. I just didn't know how to properly work it, and I just figured it out, and I'm like feeling super proud of myself. So bear with me as I am learning to navigate a new tripod. But here is my leaf Greenstalk. I'm actually going to turn you guys around because it's pretty bright out here. This is the 7 tier, but I ended up only doing 1, 2, 3, 5 tiers because I didn't have as many starts to go in there. I wanted some to go out into the tunnel. And so I only did 5. I think that's the beauty of the Greenstalk too. You don't have to plant all of them. You can have them be 3 tier, 4 tier. And so I just decided to do 5. I have the rest of them back there, and I'll add all 7 when it comes time for spring. I just didn't need it for the fall. So I was able to plant quite a bit in here. I've got a lot of rainbow chard. I've got a lot of red romaine lettuce. Here's just some leaf lettuce, more chard. That's pretty much the bulk of what all of it is. It's just chards and lettuces. My chards were starting to get really, really wimpy during the day. They were getting super, super hot. And so I knew if I just went ahead and planted these out, they'd probably do better. And I used a different potting mix. I used the Happy Frog potting mix in here this year. And I'm hoping that it'll do a lot better. I know that I've always skimped on my soil. This past summer I tried a mushroom compost, which actually did not work well at all. I was curious how it would do. I wasn't really that impressed. It didn't do that great. So I'm not going to be using that again. But yeah, I'll kind of pan around and show you guys, but that's primarily what I grew in here. It doesn't get full sun right here, which is actually really good because a lot of your fall things, especially lettuces, prefer the shade. So it does get sun, but it's not full sun all day. So there we have it. I will tell you, just from putting it in there 3 days ago, it has grown so much. So I am really happy about that. Check out these chards too. I just think they're so pretty. Rainbow chard is my favorite. I saved some of that to go in the tunnel. So that was one project that I finally got done. But one of the main projects that is on my list to get done this weekend, along with amending and planting the beds, the list keeps growing. And every homesteader said amen. The list is never ending around here, but it's okay. I was actually editing a podcast episode while I was in the car rider line waiting for Charlie, and we were talking about romanticizing the garden. And here's a little sneak peek because the episode doesn't come out until Tuesday, but I'm gonna give you this little tidbit. This is what you guys, the benefits of being YouTube subscribers. We were talking about how it is important to romanticize the garden, and it's one of the reasons that I am so thankful for my friendship with Jessica, because she taught me that it's okay to do that. And I think it is so important because the lists keep growing, right? You're always gonna have things to mark off your to-do list, and you're never gonna get it done because there's only so many hours in a day. But when you're doing what you are called to do and you're stewarding what you are passionate about, it makes those lists not as daunting. It makes each thing you check off worth it. It makes the cost, the sacrifice, the time, the sweat, sometimes the tears, it makes it all worth it. And so I want to encourage you guys today, if you are in a season where you are feeling slightly like me, in just the sense of, whoa, we got a lot of stuff on our plate. I got a lot of things on my list that aren't getting checked off. Remember why you're doing it in the first place, because I promise you, if you take a second just to kind of look back on that and have that moment of gratitude, it makes it, it just makes it not seem as daunting. And so I wake up every morning with that long list, but I wake up every morning thinking, whoa, I can't believe this farm is mine. And I come out here to the garden and I'm just wooed by what it has to offer me, and I'm wooed by what I can give back to it. And it really is just this beautiful, beautiful thing. So if you want to listen to the podcast episode, it'll be out Tuesday the 21st. I'll put the link down below. You guys can sign up so you can be notified whenever it comes out. So one of the things that I'm going to be checking off my list, but that I still have to do, is I am plant sitting for my friend Sean. And so I'm going to pan over here. You guys see all of these. These are starts that are actually going to be planted at his house and some at our house. I'd mentioned to you guys earlier in the season, we have these 3 beds over here that we have not cleaned out yet, because Sean is actually going to be cleaning these out, and he's going to be planting flowers over winter that will be blooming in the spring. So some of these are flowers that are going to be planted on our farm, but some of these are flowers that are going to be planted at his farm in the city. And so that's just what I'm doing. My goal is to keep them alive. So I'm pretty confident I can do that. But what I'm going to be doing this afternoon and into the weekend is taking these flowers right here and potting them up into the 72 cell trays. So in our basement right now, in our spare room, we've got a germination station set up. It's essentially just what I had at the old house in the herb room. And it is a rack from Home Depot with grow lights. And he has got a bunch of these 572 trays that he has seeded. They're underneath there. Whenever they pop up and they get this size, then we pot them on into either 72 cell trays, 50 cell trays, whatever you have, and then more than likely they'll go from here out into the garden. So these are snapdragons. There is the apricot variety. He's got the purple, a white, and then a Costa. And so I wanted to talk about this because Sean is one of those guys that farm professionally for a lot of years, and so he's used to having systems in place and really efficient systems. And that is somewhere that I lack. I lack having those efficient systems in place sometimes. And that's something that I've really honestly been trying to work on and do a lot better in, but it takes a while. You gotta have some grace with yourself. And so that is something that I have tried to be mindful of, that it's going to take a while to get systems in place. But you guys know I spend a lot of time potting up, transplanting up. I've talked to you guys a lot about that in previous videos. Why do you direct sow? Why do you transplant? And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. You can direct sow a lot of things, and you can transplant a lot of things. It's kind of dependent on what you're doing. So if you're, starting plants for the sake of selling them, obviously you would need to start those. That way you could up pot them and sell them. So direct seeding wouldn't make sense in that aspect. For us, we're needing these plants to be at a certain maturity and a certain size before we put them into the garden, so we're able to have a head start. Same with like your vegetables that you're growing. Usually I'm starting tomatoes in the beginning of February, no later than Valentine's Day. Had I had to wait until I could put those seeds outside, I'm going to get a much later harvest on those than starting them inside. And so I would encourage you to weigh your options, figure out what's going to make sense for you, play around with it a lot. But when I start my things, I am not starting them in these small little trays. I'll be honest, I have seen trays this size. I've never bought trays this size. I don't know that I would, because it is tedious work, but that's what I really want to talk about. So like I said, this is a 572. Here's the bottom for reference. You guys can see, there's 572 plants in this one tray versus this one tray that's 72. So you're going to have a couple of these to be equivalent to one of these. So if you are working in a small space, so maybe you don't have the space to have a whole lot of these trays, or say you're doing in 50 trays, that's a lot of trays that you're going to have to store and even just start them in, versus just you can have 500 right here, and if you're growing in a small space anyways, are you even needing to plant 500 of these at a time or start 500 of these at a time? More than likely that's not the case. So I do think if you are limited on space, this is a really good option. I know for us, we ran out of space last year in the greenhouse, which Sean is making me new tables. We're actually adding another seed starting greenhouse. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem, but I could also see how this right here would be really beneficial to me in the future to cut down on cost on the front end. So with that, I want to talk about the pros is space, right? Like you have, you're cutting down on your space. I think the con would be this is tedious work. So essentially what he's got here is a really lovely system of a pencil. And so, what he's doing is he is turning the tray over on the side, taking his little pencil and popping out the start. And so, that's what you're having to do for each of these. Another benefit though is you guys can see the roots on this guy though, it's not root bound, and so that's definitely something that I would say would be a pro to continuously pot up, because your plants are never getting root bound, versus if you started in this one, more than likely, and I know specifically for me, I grew zinnias in I think the 50 cells, and by the time I potted them up, because I seeded them in there and then I didn't do anything with them until I transplanted them out into the garden, there was roots wrapped all the way around. It had become very root bound. There were roots growing out of the bottom of this tray. And so that's actually really not good for your plants. So the benefit of starting with a smaller tray and then up potting is that you are continuously adding fresh soil, which means your plants are continuously getting fed new nutrients. And so you'll start to see a lot of times when you start your plants in these bigger cell trays and you leave them in there for a long time, that they're starting to show deficiency, and you're going to need to add some sort of fertilizer, maybe a fish emulsion, maybe a bone meal or a blood meal. You're going to have to add something back depending on what it's looking like it's lacking in. And a lot of that is because it's sucked up all the nutrients that it could out of the soil in this tray. And so now it's just like it's searching for something, right? It's starting to show signs of like, hey, help me, I'm lacking in this. This is what I'm deficient in. So I do think that this is really cool, because that is a really good point, is when you're continuously potting on, you're adding fresh new soil. You're able to kind of rejuvenate that plant every time that you're moving it from one, step to another step. Then they'll go from here out into the garden, and they'll obviously have more nutrients, because we would have hoped that you amended your bed and gave back into that soil. So I do think that this is a really good option. This is an option that I didn't really think about. It is a little bit tedious, but when you're thinking about, well, I know I'm having to, put fertilizer back into my plant starts every year. So that is an additional step that I'm doing, is I'm adding like a fish emulsion is usually what I do to my plants. So that's time and energy and resources. And this could essentially, you could bypass that altogether if you're constantly, potting on and having all those nutrients into the soil. So I don't know, I really appreciated this idea. I thought it was really cool. And also, just talking about being resourceful, we talk about plant markers. He just used old yogurt containers and cut them up and reused them. You can also just write on the side of your trays too, and so that's what he's done here. He has just kind of sectioned it off of what each variety is. And then what we'll do is, we've got this big old thing behind us full of soil. And so I'm going to add to that. We're going to mix it up really good. We're going to go ahead and get our trays ready. So I'm going to mix all my soils together. Then we're going to fill this. Then I'm going to pop out as many as I need for this. So that would look like 72. And then I'm just going to quickly go through and seed them. And I'm going to show you that process, because if you can get a good system down that works for you, you can go through it pretty fast. And it's going to take you a minute to get those systems put in place. It's not going to just like immediately happen overnight. I'm years into this and still trying to figure out systems, but I do recognize that it's essential for growth, and mainly just essential for efficiency. If you're a backyard gardener and that isn't a big deal to you, and you've got the time and this is just like leisurely what you're doing, yeah, take your time, turn on your music, drink your cup of coffee, and pot up. But I know for me, every year, specifically for the plant sale, I'm starting thousands of plants. We are doubling that this year. We are growing so many flowers. I'm so excited. And so I know that I'm going to need to have these systems put in place. And these are just things that really have helped me as I've learned them. And I just want to pass that knowledge on to you guys as well. Before I actually get into potting on, though, I wanted to show you guys what mix I'm going to be doing. He used a it's called Sun Pro Growers Mix. It's what I actually use for the plant sale. We're able to get them from a nursery called Free Aldehoven if you're local in the Conway area. And it's a really good organic just growers mix, and you can buy a really big bag of it for like 20 bucks. But I didn't want to bring that from his house, so I'm just using what I have on hand. So I'm going to mix together my back toe potting mix, which does have a fertilizer in it. And then I'm going to add my Fox Farm Seed Starter Grow Medium. I like this a lot. I added it in the Greenstalk. I don't prefer it by itself. It is just really, really light. There's not a whole lot to it, so I kind of prefer to mix it with something. So I actually mixed this with my back toe, and that's what I ended up putting in the Greenstalk. I'm going to take my spade, mix it in really good. And now it's time for the fun part. Now we get to plant all of our stuff. I really don't know why I used the spade, because I knew I was gonna put my hands in there and get dirty. So these trays were given to me. One of my friends got them from a local nursery for free, and she gave me a bunch of them. So I do want to note that I am going through, and any larger chunks, I'm just chunking them out. You always usually have some sort of debris in there. It's usually not that bad though, and the better quality soil you buy, the less chunks you have, I have found. But that is something that I encourage you to do, especially if you are seeding, you know, for the first time in these really small trays. Make sure that you're just removing any big debris that could cause issues when the roots are developing. Okay, I'll be the first to tell you, that's a lot harder than it looks. So, if this is a route you want to go, definitely have grace with yourself, because that is certainly a learning curve. That's the first time I've ever done that. But now that I have them right here, I'm just going to show you guys how quickly you can just pop them in there. You really don't have to like do them super deep, and so I'll just show you guys that process. And just like that, we have potted on 72 foxglove. Now what I'm going to do is put these in a tray like this right here, or one of my deep dish 10-20 trays from Bootstrap Farmer, and I am going to bottom water these just because they are so small and delicate. I don't want to be overwatering, but you guys see that can be a pretty quick process. And then they're going to come out here. So they're going to be out here under the pavilion with all of the other starts. So they go from inside underneath the little germination station out here, and then they'll be in garden bed pretty soon. So it is pretty simple. I just remember when I first started out, I would be like so delicate and so like, it was just like tedious work because I was trying to be so gentle. I was trying to make sure there was, you know, soil equally around all the sides. I want to make sure I was planting it deep, like doing all the things. And I've realized over time, plants are stinking resilient, and you'd be surprised what you can put them through and they bounce back. And just that you don't have to be that gentle with them. They're not that delicate, and so you can move through this pretty quickly. This took me a little bit longer just because I wasn't as used to like popping those out. I'm sure by the time I get a couple hundred under my belt, I'll be going a little bit faster. But I wanted to show you guys what I was up to out in the garden today, and also just share with you guys some of these tips if this is something that can be relevant to you guys and you can kind of take a piece of this video and apply it, and it might be helpful. That would be really awesome. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I'll talk to you soon.